They told him to move, not asked, not explained. Told like it was law, like it was still 1955. "Sir, premium passengers sit up front," the driver barked without turning around. "You'll have to take a seat in the back." Elijah didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't move, not right away. He sat in the aisle seat of row 2, crisp navy slacks, a grey Oxford shirt pressed flat as glass, loafers polished like his grandfather used to do every Saturday night before church. His hands rested calmly on a leather folio, nothing flashy, but it was the kind of stillness that threatened people like the driver. "I said the back," the man repeated, now glancing in the mirror, lips pursed like the taste of power had gone bitter. "Or you can wait for the next shuttle." "A few," passengers murmured. One woman in workout gear glanced over, then returned to scrolling. A man in a fleece vest looked annoyed by the delay. Nobody said a word in Elijah's defense, they never do. Elijah's voice was low and warm. "This isn't reserved seating," the driver exhaled, theatrical. "Sir, I don't want a problem. This route is private property. If you don't move, I'll have to radio dispatch." Elijah met his eyes in the mirror, slow and even. Then, just as calm, he rose, moved 2 rows back. Not to the very end, but far enough that the message stuck. The driver grunted in satisfaction, as if he'd won something. As the wheels pulled away from the curb, Elijah adjusted his cuffs and tapped open the folder in his lap. He took a photo. The driver's ID badge, Alan G., was visible in the reflection above the steering wheel. Then he scrolled to a contact labeled Delaney Transit Legal. He didn't send the photo, not yet. Instead, he typed just 3 words. "Pull the contract." He pressed save, closed the folder, rested his head against the cool window pane. Outside, the trees flashed by, green, gold, and flame-colored, like the change coming, because this wasn't just any bus line. This route ran through his old neighborhood. And this bus, it bore the same name as the one that left his grandfather bleeding in 1962 for sitting in the front. But Elijah had waited long enough. The bus rattled past boarded-up homes and freshly painted condos, like someone had laid gentrification over history. With a paint roller, Elijah watched the familiar curves of Ellison Street. A left at the old Masonic Lodge, now a Pilates studio, and you'd hit Jefferson Park. He used to play there back when the swings were rusted and the benches still held the heat of his grandfather's sermons. The first time he heard the story, Elijah was 6. His grandfather had told it with a trembling hand and glassy eyes, sitting on their porch, the summer sun high, the cicadas loud. A story not wrapped in bitterness, but in instruction. A lesson passed like a baton. "They didn't like me sitting up front," the old man had said, rubbing the scar above his brow. "Didn't like the look of me in pressed slacks and polished shoes. Thought I was getting uppity. That day, I didn't move." Little Elijah had asked, "What happened next?" His grandfather paused, long enough that the wind had to answer first. "They dragged me out, kicked me till my ribs cracked." Then he chuckled, a dry, sad chuckle that made Elijah's stomach twist. "Said I was disturbing the peace. Funny. Thing is, I was the peace." Back in the present, Elijah glanced down at his phone. The message from legal had come in. "Contract up for renewal in 14 days. You want us to stall or strike?" He didn't reply. Not yet. The bus jolted as it hit a pothole no one had bothered to fix in years. The woman in Lululemon complained under her breath. The driver grunted. From his pocket, Elijah pulled a folded piece of newsprint, yellowed and worn at the creases. He opened it slowly, reverently. "Local man arrested after bus disturbance. Police say 27-year-old Elijah Warner Sr. refused to vacate a front seat on a Leland County Transit shuttle. Witnesses say he was forcibly removed. No photo. Just 2 short paragraphs, a footnote in history. But it was enough. The same company, The same route, same stretch of pavement that once soaked up his grandfather's blood, now carried him in silence. Only this time, Elijah was not a 27-year-old man, alone with hope and Sunday shoes. He was Elijah Warner III, majority stakeholder in Urban Vector Mobility Holdings. The driver had asked him to move, but soon Elijah would be asking him to leave, with severance if he was lucky. He smiled faintly, folded the article and tucked it back into his pocket like a prayer. The bus slowed at a red light near Carver and 9th, his stop. He rose again, not to prove anything, just to walk. To think. Because there was still one more stop Elijah needed to make, one the driver and the board of Delaney Transit would never see coming. The cemetery was quiet, not silent, but respectfully still. The kind of quiet that holds breath. Between headstones. That lets wind speak when words won't do. Elijah stood alone beside the narrow plaque. The name Elijah Warner Sr. carved in iron. The grass around it was trimmed, but the earth still sagged slightly from where time had folded over it. He didn't bring flowers. Didn't need to. Instead, he reached down and laid the folded newsprint gently against the stone. "I kept it," he said, his voice low, dry. "Even after they digitized the archives, I kept this exact clipping." A breeze carried the edge of the paper up like it wanted to read it too. He pressed it flat again with his hand. "I sat in the same seat, Grandad. On purpose. That driver told me I wasn't a premium rider." He paused. "Didn't use those words, but you know the kind of words they use when they want to say something else." He looked out past the other headstones. A few birds scattered from a pine nearby. "You told me not to fight them with fists. You said legacy is louder." Elijah crouched down, balancing on the balls of his feet, and placed a silver transit token beside the plaque. Not an old one, a new one. One that still worked in the city's modern tap machines. He whispered, "That line? Yours now." He stood again, brushing off his slacks. Not in a rush. His car waited 2 blocks down just outside the cemetery gate. He never had his driver drop him inside. Some places you walk into on your own. As he turned to leave, he checked his phone. A new message had come through. This one from the acquisition. "Team, they don't know it's us yet. Shell Company has the winning bid. Signed deal closes in 13 days unless contested. Perfect. Let the driver enjoy his route. Let the board rest easy with their casual biases and slouched policies. Let them believe the man they asked to move to the back had disappeared into silence. Because Elijah wasn't back there anymore. He was already behind the wheel, not of the bus, of the company. And once the deal closed, Alan G. wouldn't just be radioing dispatch. He'd be meeting his new boss. The boardroom was glass, sterile and smug. 6 chairs around a faux marble table, all filled with men in navy suits and pastel ties. One woman, blonde, blunt bob, lemon-colored blazer, was typing rapidly on a MacBook. The Delaney Transit. Logo gleamed faintly from the frosted glass wall behind them. The meeting was already in progress. "Frankly, I think this new buyer's offer is too good to pass up," said Alan Kruger, the COO, his voice low and lazy with entitlement. "The bid's 22% over our valuation. That route's been a money pit for 5 years anyway. Let them deal with it." Another board member, Williams Finance, nodded. "What's the name again? Something Holdings?" "Windmere Mobility," the woman answered without looking up. "Based in Jersey. Shell of a shell. They sent their rep to sit in today." Kruger smirked. "Let me guess. Some Wall Street suit trying to flip public transit like it's crypto." The door opened, and Elijah walked in. Crisp charcoal suit, no tie, collar unbuttoned just once. A leather folio under his arm, the same one from the shuttle. His shoes didn't squeak. His presence did all the talking. The room shifted, no one stood, but they straightened. Elijah gave a polite nod. "Morning," Kruger blinked. Sorry, you are—" Elijah Warner. I'm the managing partner for Winmere, here to finalize the route acquisition. The room stalled, just a second too long. Williams forced a handshake. Oh, well, welcome. Didn't know they sent someone local. Elijah smiled with no teeth. We're very local. That route runs through my family's neighborhood, has for generations. Kruger coughed, unamused. Right, well, you're getting a bargain. That zone's a sinkhole. Elijah opened his folio. On the contrary, it's undervalued, underserved, and overdue for reinvestment. He slid a packet across the table. We'll be rebranding it. New name, new uniforms, and a new code of conduct for drivers. Kruger barely masked a scoff. Code of conduct for who? For everyone who thinks some people don't belong up front, Elijah said evenly, his voice calm as a closed door. The woman in the yellow blazer finally looked up from her keyboard. Elijah continued, pulling up a tablet. With a tap, the screen lit up, a still frame from a bus security camera. Alan G. in full view, leaning over his shoulder at a passenger. I believe you've met my grandfather's route. I had the pleasure of riding it last week. Kruger's mouth went dry. The others exchanged glances. No hard feelings, Elijah said, but we'll be conducting a full audit of all active drivers, starting with Alan G. He turned to the woman. You can go ahead and process the name change. On the route's registry, we're calling it the Elijah Warner line, dedicated to a man who once refused to move. The silence in the room was rich, almost reverent, and then Elijah, without another word, closed his folio, tucked it under his arm and headed toward the door. He stopped just before stepping out. Next time someone tells a black man he doesn't belong in the front seat, he looked back with just enough fire in his eyes. Make sure he doesn't already own the bus. Alan G. was mad, not the loud kind, not yelling at a sports bar mad. No, this was the quieter kind, the kind that made you grind your molars till your gums hurt, the kind that made a man feel like the world had shifted under him and no one had the courtesy to warn him. He sat stiffly across from a black woman in HR named Ms. Turner, whose expression had the calm finality of a closed book. This isn't disciplinary, she said. It's informational, but depending on your response it may become formal. Alan crossed his arms. So now I'm in trouble for keeping the front seats clear for premium members. Ms. Turner didn't blink. There's no premium. Seating on public shuttle routes there never has been. That's not true. We used to... She slid a laminated document across the table. The new company code of conduct. Bright blue header, bold text. Section 2.1. No employee shall deny, delay, or discourage seating or service based on appearance, perceived class, or racial bias, implicit or expressed. Alan's face flushed. This is political correctness. Gone too far? Ms. Turner gave a tight smile. No, Mr. Garrison, this is ownership doing what should have been done decades ago. He shifted in his seat. So what now? You'll attend bias training. You'll shadow a route supervisor, and you'll wear the new uniform. Starting Monday. Alan raised a brow. New uniform? She opened a box beside her and lifted out a navy jacket embroidered with gold lettering. The Elijah Warner line ride forward. He stared at it, like it burned his fingers just to look. Meanwhile, outside, buses rolled out across the east side with fresh paint and louder engines. The community noticed. Fast people took pictures of the logo, of the plaque installed on the main route sign, dedicated to Elijah Warner Sr., who refused to move. Teenagers posted videos on TikTok reenacting the story. One went viral overnight. Elders smiled as they boarded, not because the seats had changed, but because the power behind them had. Even the old route map in Jefferson Park got updated, with new stops added near community centers and churches. Elijah walked the street in silence that day. No suit. Just jeans, sneakers, and a T-shirt that read, "Legacy doesn't back down," A boy, no more than 9, tugged his mother's arm as Elijah passed. "Mom, that's him, right? The guy from the TikTok?" The mother looked, paused, then smiled. "Yes, baby, that's the man who bought the whole bus." Elijah gave the boy a small nod, one his grandfather might have given him, and kept walking. The same sidewalk, different direction. The podium was too new, too polished, too white, not in color. In feel, freshly installed just for the press event, with city council banners draped across the background and folding chairs filled with news cameras, staffers, and politeness. Elijah didn't like it, but he was there. A request from the mayor's office. "Good, it would mean so much to the community if you'd speak, Mr. Warner." He'd resisted at first. The work was already done. Let the route speak for itself. But then Ms. Turner had said quietly, "Don't let them narrate your win before you get a chance to." So here he was, in a charcoal blazer. No script, just a folded copy of the article, the one from 1962, tucked into his inner pocket close to his heart. Mayor Davidson was wrapping up her statement, smiling through stats and bullet points. And thanks to the generosity and vision of Urban Vector Mobility Holdings, the city is proud to unveil the renamed Elijah Warner Line, commemorating the struggle and the strength of a community that refuses to be forgotten. A polite round of applause, not warm, not cold, just appropriate. Then they called Elijah up. He stepped forward slowly. No smile, not cold, just present. Real. The mic caught a whisper of wind behind him as he began. "I was 6 when I first heard the story, about a man who sat in the wrong seat on the right day and paid for it with cracked ribs and quiet humiliation. That man was my grandfather. They called it a disturbance, said he disrupted the peace. But the truth is, his presence was the peace, his dignity, his refusal to be small." He glanced up, not at the press, but beyond them, to the crowd spilling into the back rows, families, teenagers, bus riders, retired city workers in folding chairs. "I didn't buy this route to fix history. I bought it to make sure no kid ever has to carry a legacy soaked in silence. We renamed it the Elijah Warner Line, not for me, for the man who bled on the sidewalk, for the people who still get told you don't belong here. I came today to say we do. We always have." There was a moment. Quiet. Then a slow, steady rise of claps. Real ones. From the back first, not the VIP rows. And that's when Elijah saw him standing beneath a tree at the far end of the crowd. Alan G. No uniform today. Just a hoodie, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes unreadable. He didn't move, didn't scowl, just watched. Elijah held his gaze for a long second, then gave him the smallest nod. Not forgiveness, not friendship, just acknowledgement. That even the people who tried to push you back sometimes had to witness what standing tall looked like. And with that, Elijah stepped down. No interviews, no handshakes, just the sound of the community behind him, rising. The sun was sliding down behind the brick buildings, washing the east side in gold and rust. At the corner of Ellison and 9th, the original bus stop still stood, the one with the crooked bench and half-torn route map. It hadn't been renovated. Yet Elijah sat alone on that bench as the wind curled around him, hands clasped loosely, eyes fixed on nothing. This was the spot where his grandfather had boarded the bus that day, where the blood had stained the curb, where a boy had once traced cracks in the sidewalk, listening to stories told in whispers and sighs. He came here now, not for press, not for plans, but for peace. The new shuttle hadn't started this route yet, but people were still waiting. A woman with her daughter, an older man with a limp, 2 high school boys joking about snacks and sneakers, and then a stranger. A young man in a faded denim jacket approached, nodding toward the other end of the bench. "Mind if I sit?" Elijah gestured. "Go ahead." The young man sat, digging, in his backpack pulling out a small brown envelope. "I saw you on the news," he said quietly, not looking up. "Didn't think you'd be out here. Thought they'd have you in some office somewhere." Elijah gave a soft chuckle. "Sometimes the office is just noise. This is memory." The young man nodded. "My grandfather knew yours. Said he used to run a shoe shine stand outside the post office." "He did," Elijah smiled faintly. "Always said a good shine could teach you more about a man than his handshake." The boy hesitated, then held out the envelope. This was his. "Hi, passed last year. Said if the name Elijah Warner ever meant something again in this city, to give it to you." Elijah accepted it slowly, unfolded it. Inside was a photo, black and white. 3 men in suits, one in the middle, his grandfather. The other 2, policemen, one with a baton raised, captured mid-motion, mid-history on E. The back, in faded pencil, was written, "They couldn't break him, 1962. Elijah stared at it for a long time, longer than he meant to. "Thank you," he finally said. "This means more than you know." The young man stood to go. "You already proved it meant something. You brought his name back, gave us something to sit on. That ain't shame, as—" He walked off. Elijah stayed seated, the photo resting on his lap, and for the first time in years he let himself exhale. Not the sharp breath of restraint, not the silent one of strategy. A full one. Like something that had waited generations had finally landed. It was a rainy morning, not the hard kind, but slow and steady, like the city was rinsing itself clean. Droplets slid down the newly installed glass panel at the Jefferson Park shuttle. Stop, where the logo now gleamed beneath the overhang. The Elijah Warner line ride forward. Elijah was early. The first official morning of the fully transitioned route. The new buses, the retrained staff, the new uniforms, all of it began. Today he wasn't here to make a speech, wasn't here to ride, he just needed to see it run, to watch it move. He stood with his coffee, collar turned up, eyes steady on the curve where the bus would appear, and then a voice behind him. "You did all this? Because of one man?" Elijah turned. It was a teenage girl. Brown skin. Dark. Hoodie, earbuds hanging loose. She looked at him the way some kids do. Too sharp for her age, but tired in a way she didn't earn. He nodded slowly. "One man, and every person who came after him but never got their seat." She frowned. "My uncle says it's just a bus. Says people like you always want to make everything about race." Elijah smiled softly, not offended, just patient. "That's what they said about the water fountains, the lunch counters, the school doors, the voting booths." He looked her in the eye. "Nothing's ever just anything when someone tells you you're not allowed." She didn't say anything for a beat. Then she sat on the bench beside him, opened her sketch pad. He glanced over. A half-finished drawing of the new bus design. Bold lines, thick tires, and the gold route lettering. "You drew that?" She shrugged. "I like to draw stuff I ride." Elijah's smile grew. "Maybe I'll send that to marketing." She rolled her eyes. "Don't make it corny." Then the bus turned the corner, fresh paint. New driver. A young woman this time, with coils piled high and mirrored shades on. She slowed to the curb and opened the door with a hydraulic hiss. The girl stood, tucked her sketchbook into her hoodie. "Thanks, mister." She paused. "Wait. You're the guy, right? The Elijah guy?" He raised an eyebrow. "Guess I am." She gave a small, lopsided grin. "Cool." And then she boarded. Elijah stood there watching as the doors closed, and the bus pulled away, and not fast, not slow, just steady. It wasn't about one stop anymore. It was about the line, where it led, who it carried, and who was finally driving it forward. As the rain slowed, Elijah took one last look down the road and turned to walk away. Not because the work was done, but because the baton had been passed, and the line would never go backward again.